hasn't changed at all. So while they're standing beside you, won't you tell them the score? Won't you tell them a story of the days in the way back when? Every now and then.
This is the children's bedroom. Most of the action figures boys play with today are from the movies or afternoon cartoons or TV shows. They're all posable, which means you can move their arms and legs into all sorts of positions. A while back, every kid played with Star Wars figures. Then it was Transformers. And now it's 4 turtles named after Italian artists. Who knows what'll come next? We bought Army men and cowboys and Indians by the bagful when I was a kid. 79 cents would buy 50 or so figures at the 5 and 10 up on the avenue. They were little rubber figures about 2 inches high. The Army guys were olive green. The Indians were a copper red. The cowboys could be any color. When I stopped to think about it, we spent most of our time getting the figures set up. It was almost impossible if you were playing on a carpet. And then the battles only took a couple of seconds before all the guys were knocked down.
I had quite a collection of tin soldiers as a boy. Some wore foreign uniforms like the Prussian Dragoons or the Scots Highlanders, but most were Civil War soldiers wearing Union and Confederate battle dress. Now, I grew up in a little town not far from Gettysburg, so needless to say, I spent many hours staging the Gettysburg campaign in my backyard, complete with Little Round Top, Big Round Top, Cemetery Ridge, Pickett's Charge, the whole kit and caboodle. We lived right on the Mason-Dixon line, so I was part Southerner myself. And my favorite toy soldier was that of General Lee himself, sitting astride his great battle horse.
This is the children's bedroom. When today's workers build buildings, they don't usually use stone or wood like in the old days. Instead, they're likely to build a framework out of steel girders, which they kind of hang the walls on.
I know. That's how my building set works.
Right. They're made from hard plastic in the shape of girders, which can be snapped together to make any kind of building at all. And then walls and windows and a roof can be added later.
But that's not all. I can also use the set to make cars and spaceships, boats and planes, with glow-in-the-dark pieces. Almost anything I want. The sky's the limit.
Cowboys and Indians was the game we all played when I was a kid, either dressing up ourselves or playing with our toy soldiers and Indians. And what better way to build a fort or a settler's home than with Lincoln logs? They were easy to use, just brown logs with notches at the end so you could lock them together at the corners, just like building a real log cabin. The roofs were made with yellow or green boards, and you could finish it off with a red chimney or two, or even a sign if you wanted. The best thing about it, though, was the little single-notched logs. They made great cannonballs when the attack on the fort finally came.
My favorite Christmas present the year I turned 9 was an erector set. Until then, I just had wooden building blocks. But with an erector set, I got to use a real screwdriver and wrench, tools just like Dad used. The whole set was made out of metal, girders, wall sections, and all. You got hundreds of little nuts and bolts to fasten the girders together with. And believe me, I soon learned how to use my tools safely. Those first days after Christmas, I got about a dozen digs and cuts from the screwdriver slipping off the screw. My father wasn't a scholar. I don't think he ever got beyond 3 years of schooling, as a matter of fact. But he had the most educated pair of hands I've ever seen. He could make anything out of wood, from a fine jewelry box to an entire house. He said that I could too, even as a child, and he made me wooden building blocks of every possible kind to play with. He made me pillars and columns to build Greek temples, blocks to build pyramids with, rough log shapes to make log cabins, arches, blocks with windows cut into them, every kind. Every year I got more and more, and every year my buildings got bigger and more complicated. And you know something? I never stopped building. A doctor my dad did work for saw that I had some talent and offered to send me to college to study architecture if my dad would help him build a small hospital for the poor in town.
This is the children's bedroom. The toy cars kids today play with are more real than toy. What can they do?
Just about everything.
You're not kidding. Motorized cars race around tracks, do daredevil jumps and loop-de-loops. Some run over land or sea, and some are even radio-controlled so you can send them through the house or up the street and back, all without any tracks or wires. Every year, about a day or two before Christmas, Dad, my brother, and I would bring our electric trains down from the attic and set them up in our basement. We laid out the track on a 4x8 sheet of plywood. I was the youngest, so while they nailed it down, I set up the plastic buildings and trees and fences on the green grass paper that covered the plywood. We had freight trains, a coal tender, and box cars and tank cars, all pulled by a black locomotive that actually smoked and whistled. The best part was when we turned out the basement lights and got down to eye level with the trains. You could almost imagine you were one of the little figures in the town as you watched the locomotive come roaring around the curve and over the bridge.
I couldn't have been any more than 4 years old at the time. I'd hear my dad get up for work on dark winter mornings just about the time the milk wagon rattled down our street. The milkman would rein his horse in front of our house, leave a quart or two of milk, and be on his way. Later, after my breakfast, I'd build a replica of our street with my wooden blocks, then get out my toy metal milk wagon to make my own deliveries. It had little tin milk cases and wooden bottles painted white, a driver and a brown mare to pull the wagon. Mom gave me different sized buttons from the sewing basket to use for money. That's how I made change for my customers. Jackson, my hobby horse, was a wonder to behold. He was a brown and white spotted pony with a mane and tail made from real horsehair, a red leather bridle and saddle, and red painted runners. In my imagination, I rode Jackson on cavalry raids against the British, across the wide plains of the Western Territories, and the entire length of the Oregon Trail. And even after I got my own pony to ride at the age of 6, Jackson wasn't put out to pasture. He still had to carry my younger brothers and sisters off on their adventures. My toys were small, hand-carved wooden affairs when I was a boy. One I remember with special fondness was a pair of acrobats, which took turns flipping over a wooden bar as I cranked the handle. Watching them go through their paces was fun, but you know, I think I spent more time thinking about how the toy worked, why turning a little handle could cause so much to happen.
This is the children's bedroom. Collecting baseball or sports cards today is a pretty complicated affair. It's no longer just a kid's hobby. Sure, you can still go buy a pack of cards at the corner store, but you'll also want to check out the new Rated Rookies or MVP Superstar cards at your local sports card dealer. But don't forget to check the price list before you buy. In fact, a kid today is likely to spend as much time studying how much his favorite third baseman's card is worth as he is memorizing last year's batting average or home run total. I was an addict. I can see that now. My 1955 allowance was 25 cents a week, which I got after my chores on Saturday morning. By Saturday afternoon, I'd spent it all at the corner store on 5 packs of baseball cards, which got me about 35 cards and 5 pieces of bubble gum. And by then, I was out trying to find a lawn to mow for some extra money. Funny thing, though, To us, last year's cards didn't mean much. It was only the most recent cards that we valued. We played flip with our doubles and triples and older cards. You and your buddies lined up about 10 feet from a wall and flipped your cards at the wall. When your turn came to flip a card, you got to pick up any other cards that yours landed on. It was a fun game, and every so often you could win quite a valuable card.
I held solid gold in my hands as a boy and didn't even know it. My dad gave me 1 or 2 cigarette cards every day, and I had everybody. I had Babe Ruth, Christy Mathewson, Mel Ott, The Big Train, that was Walter Johnson, Tris Speaker, Shoeless Joe, everybody. And believe it or not, I seem to remember an old Honus Wagner cigarette card in my shoebox, which was a rarity even then, but today is worth over $100,000. What a world.
This is the children's bedroom.
There's no denying it. I watch a lot of television and listen to a lot of radio, probably more than I should. And even when I'm doing something else, it's usually to the sound of TV or radio playing in the background. I'm constantly hearing new things, on the news, on commercials, from the VCR, and I remember most of it. Or at least I thought I did, until my family and I started playing trivia games. You know, the games where you ask each other all sorts of questions about silly, unimportant things, and a person who remembers the most wins. It's fun because I can answer as many questions as my mom and dad. They may know lots of stuff about old movies and TV shows from the 50s, but I know more about sports and modern day stuff, and I surprise them every now and then with what I've picked up from old reruns.
For 50 weeks out of the year, the Monopoly game sat in the top of the hall closet. But for about 2 weeks in the summer, usually in August, when swimming and baseball cards lost their novelty and Mom was out shopping for school supplies, that'd be the time for our neighborhood Monopoly tournament.
We do that, too.
Right. 5 or 6 of us would set up the game on the front porch, lower the green canvas awning so we could play even during thunderstorms, and sit there talking, rolling the dice, making deals, and building hotels from 8 in the morning till dinner time. It was great because it was something boys and girls could do together, brothers and sisters and best friends alike. I think it was how we took a breather from summer. We talked about our escapades, laughed at each other's stories, and lent each other thousands of dollars of Monopoly money so nobody had to drop out of the game. And as the days wore on and summer wore down, our talk turned more toward school.
Parcheesi was all the rage when I was a youngster in the 1920s. The game came from India, and the board was filled with bright colors and fantastic shapes and designs. You rolled dice out of little cardboard containers, and to win, you had to get all your pieces around the board and into the center before anybody else. The game itself was fun, but I think we liked it even more because it came from so far away. And that was so exciting.
This is the children's bedroom.
One thing that doesn't change from one generation to the next is nursery rhymes. We all learn the same rhymes, boys and girls alike. Jack and Jill, Little Bo Peep, Humpty Dumpty, Ring Around the Rosie, they never change. Some of them are hundreds and hundreds of years old. They're the first stories we learn, and they connect us all. Grandmother, mother, and daughter, father, son, and grandson, together.
This is the children's bedroom.
Parents used to tell their children all sorts of stories about where babies came from. Some said that babies came down from a cloud, others that they were brought by the stork, and some that babies were found under a cabbage leaf in the garden. Now, that may not be so for babies, but for dolls, who knows? Lots of dolls in little girls' arms in recent years have come from the Cabbage Patch, that's for sure. Cabbage Patch dolls are made mostly from cloth and are just about the size of real infants. And like real infants, each one is different than every other. They don't walk or cry or wet or talk or do any of the things that some other baby dolls do. So why do little girls love them so? Well, they're soft and warm, and from the looks of them, they need lots of special care and love. All little girls had dolls in my day. On the farm, life was hard and very busy, and on bitter cold winter days or long summer afternoons, Ma and Pa's work went on long after my own chores were done. Now, I had friends and playmates on neighboring farms, true, but that was only during visiting. So most days when I got tired playing with my brothers, I'd fashion playmates out of straw or corn husks. I'd make entire families of dolls some days, poppets I called them, and make up a story and a life history to match. This one never got married, and this one had a husband off to war, and this one taught Sunday school, and my favorite, of course, was the one who went to the barn dance on Saturday evenings, courted by the handsomest poppets in my neighborhood.
I had my share of chores to do as a girl back in the 1860s, sweeping and dusting and washing and sewing. But Mother and Father also allowed me time for play and daydreaming, and I spent those hours with my rag doll. Now, Sarah wasn't much to look at. Mother sewed her together from one of her old dresses and stuffed her with one of Father's torn shirts. But she was just the right size to carry around, or to hold on my lap in the rocker by the window. I took her to bed with me every night, my cheek up against hers, because she smelled like dreams, I told my mother once. She just smiled and said yes, she sewed them into Sarah too, right along with the rags.
Back in the 50s, all of us girls wanted dolls that could do something. Some of us owned dolls that could cry real tears. Others had dolls that could wet, and some had dolls that moved their arms or said, Mama, when you pressed their tummies. Dolls with names like Tiny Tears or Betsy Wetsy. Most dolls had blonde hair and big blue eyes and had movable plastic arms and legs, so they could sit up or hold their arms out. And, oh yes, one other thing. When you laid them down on their backs, their eyes would close. They all did that.
This is the children's bedroom.
Each season has a sport, it seems, sometimes more than one. In the spring and early summer, we play softball. Later in the summer, it's swimming. On crisp autumn Saturdays, we play soccer. And during the winter, when it's too cold to play outdoors, we play basketball. Most of our team's sports are organized and have adult coaches. But we spend a lot of our time just playing on our own, too, having foot races, riding bikes, playing kick the can or capture the flag with our brothers. Anything that gives us a chance to run around and let off steam. My childhood during the 1950s was spent in the city. We didn't have a garden or meadows to play in. We had the sidewalk and the street. We didn't have backyards. We had driveways. So the games we played were city games. We played giant steps out back and roller skated around the block for hours on end. We played jacks and marbles on the front steps and set up our own Summer Olympics right in the driveway with trash cans for hurdles and chalk to mark how far we could broad jump. And if the weather was right, we had shadow races where we'd race the shadows of the clouds the length of the block. Oh, what I wouldn't give to play those games again. I expect Mom did her share of running and tumbling as a girl in the 1920s, but the games she used to tell me about when I was a girl had more to do with coordination and rhythm than with outright speed. Like jacks, for instance, or jump rope. She'd play double dutch or red hot pepper with her friends in the schoolyard, all the while singing the most complicated rhymes. She taught me all the ones she could remember, and my friends and I sang them when we jumped rope, right along with our own rhymes. Oh my, we didn't really have what you would call sports when I was a girl. Of course, we didn't just sit by the fire and knit stockings either, not by a long shot. We girls had races, and rode horses, and climbed trees, and swam in the stream, and skipped stones, just like our brothers did. But we didn't think of them as sports. They were part of the fabric of the day,
just like chores or meals or going to school.
This is the children's bedroom.